welcome back to the Think Well. In this edition, we're going to be touching on something that Jordan Peterson commented on, which was multiculturalism. And I thought I would touch on that now because it's particularly pertinent in the wave of immigration, in the immigration row that's happening in terms of immigration, especially in Britain at the moment, and what's going on in the States in terms of ICE and the fact that you have had such an uproar in terms of immigration, both in the US and in the UK, the Unite Britain, and so on and so forth. So I thought this particularly pertinent to raise this now. Now, Jordan Peterson, this was years ago, commented that the multicultural project was doomed to fail. It was inevitably on a trajectory that would fail because of the clash of cultures, and there couldn't possibly be unity that could emerge out of multiculturalism. And so it was doomed to fail, except for when it came to food and the culinary delights that are whipped up by the different cultures that exist. And that this was perhaps the only positive, or one of the only positives, that can come from multiculturalism in terms of food. And maybe he might, sort of bend himself over backwards to say the arts in terms of maybe music and things of that nature. But certainly not the basis of political cohesion and unity amongst peoples. And I see it very differently. I see it very differently based on my readings, especially by an African philosopher called Emmanuel Aziz, Chukwudi Aziz. And he wrote the book called On Reason. On Reason, Rationality in a World of Cultural Conflict and Racism. So rationality in a world of cultural conflict and racism. And I think that this book is particularly pertinent. I've not read all of it, but I've read significant chapters in it, and I gravitate towards the reasoning that Emmanuel Aziz lays out, the late Emmanuel Aziz, God bless him. And what he argues in this book is that there is a gap in consciousness. And the gap in consciousness, or the conscious gap, this is the gap in consciousness that exists between different human beings, but also between different cultures and different ways, different worldviews. There is also a gap in consciousness between the mentally well and the mentally unwell, which is why people who are mentally well can't understand the mental processes of somebody who's mentally unwell. A brain that is sick, there's a conscious gap there. There's a conscious gap between men and female, between male and females, because the brain is structured in a way that creates this conscious gap. We're seeing and we're interacting with the phenomenal world in different ways. There's a conscious gap between adults and children, although we have once been children, so we have insight. But often there isn't that insight between cultures or races, or between male and female, or people perhaps different sexualities, homosexuals and heterosexuals. There's a gap in consciousness. There's a gap in the brain in terms of the unique interaction that we're having with the phenomenal world. Male and female interaction, the different interactions, the different sexual orientations, the way in which we are being stimulated, okay? The brain is functioning and perceiving and operating its empiricism, it's experiencing the world in different ways. And so it is with cultures. I hope that that's coherent. So there is this gap in consciousness that Emmanuel Aziz argues. But he says that is not the basis for conflict, that is the basis for unity. Because if we look at this gap in consciousness, this is what we would call diverse planetary reason. And I touched upon this in my last post. But diverse planetary reason is the only way that I would argue, and Emmanuel Aziz would argue, is our only hope of achieving objective reason. Because it gives us a glimpse over the fence of the Creator, the one who has created all things. And so the gap in consciousness is the basis of diverse planetary reason. The diversity of reason, which allows us to look round the corner in a place that we would not be able to if we stuck to our own consciousness that we are rooted in. And I would argue that every culture has its excesses. There is no one cultural mode of reason that is absolutely correct, including my own, I would say. okay, which more leans towards the Afrocentric dimension of reason. But I would say that the Afrocentric has its excesses. I would say that the Eurocentric has its excesses. I would say that the Asia-centric consciousness has its excesses in terms of its cultural indulgences. And where one ends, so another one begins. And my argument would be that if we remove the excesses and we are able to perceive the excesses of each culture by measuring it by other cultures and looking at it through the viewpoint of other cultures. So if I'm looking at the Afrocentric through the Eurocentric lens, I might be able to then filter out excesses in the Afrocentric because I'm looking at it from the Eurocentric perspective. And I'm able to pick out what I believe to be mathematical truths that are inherent to the European cultures that allow me to filter out the excesses in the Afrocentric. So it is with the Eurocentric. I can use the Afrocentric or the African-centered mode of reason to filter out the excesses that exist in the European or the Eurocentric. So I can with the Asian-centric when we look at different perspectives that have given birth to different religions and different modes of reasoning and different ways of behaving. One fills in the gap of the other, thus giving us objective planetary reason, to use a different term. Emmanuel Aziz called it diverse planetary reason. I would like to call it objective planetary reason. Okay? Now, I've not heard anybody use that before. I'm not plagiarizing. If somebody's created that term before, objective planetary reason, I'll put my hand up and say fair enough. But as far as I know, I'm the only one who's used that terminology. I've not heard it used by anybody else. I would call it objective planetary reason, or our only hope for objective planetary reason. That is to use each culture to filter out the excesses of each other culture. If we look at the Eurocentric, and I use it because it's the dominant mode of reason that governs planet Earth. Eurocentric reason is the gatekeeper that controls all things on planet Earth. And it is that mode of reasoning that has given birth to capitalism and the civilization that we culturally inhabit that is the dominant mode. Okay? For me, the Eurocentric is littered with excesses. It's on its own. It claims to be the objective truth. That is folly. That's absolute folly as far as I'm concerned, based on the line of reasoning that I've taken thus far, including the line of reason that the Afrocentric also has its excesses. But that isn't the dominant mode of reason that's claiming absolute truth. Okay? It's the Eurocentric that is claiming absolute authority on all things, to know the heavens and the earth. It is claiming to be the objective force that everybody should cower to. So it has done with on reason. It claims that all other modes of reason are superfluous to requirement, that they are savage, primitive modes of reasoning, because they delve into what it calls the metaphysical realm. Okay? Particularly the Afrocentric it picks up on. Now, what I would like to pick out in terms of this metaphysics is simply the world that exists beyond the physical world. To just break down that fancy term, okay? Metaphysics is simply meta, beyond, above. So beyond the physical. Let's just, in simple terms. Now, the Afrocentric perspective, which my brain is tapped into, it is tangent. There's nothing metaphysical about the way that my consciousness is operating. It is tangent. In terms of its conception of the universe and what is reality, it is tangent. It isn't pointing me to anything that's airy-fairy. I'm tapped in. I'm plugged in to this reality. My consciousness is there and it is tangent. It is real. Just like the Eurocentric consciousness would be tapped into what is real. And it can only plot its trajectory, its cultural trajectory, in terms of what is tangent. So my argument is that all reason, to a certain extent, is tangent and real. Therefore, we must look for the excesses in it. because we can only see so far. And we need to use each of the different cultures to create objective planetary reason. That would be the mode of unity. But to do that, we would have to accept that there is part of our culture, part of our consciousness that is fundamentally flawed. And that's where the problem lies, because we feel it to be tangent and real. But we must accept that there are other cultures and tangent realities that are also real. Therefore, we need a multiple view of reality. And I use this analogy to make my point, and I'll try to leave it there. That if you're driving a car, in a vehicle, you have the rear view mirror central to you in the vehicle that is there, above your head there, above there, the rear view mirror in your car there. And you have your wing mirrors. Why are they necessary? Why are all of them necessary? If there were one mirror that would point to the absolute truth of your perspective, because each is reflecting tangent reality. Each mirror is reflecting tangent reality in your vehicle. Not so. There's no mirror in your car that is projecting or transmitting an illusion. It's not. There's no mirror in your car that is projecting an illusion. It's projecting reality. Each mirror. Your rear view, your central rear view, your left hand side wing mirror, and your right hand side wing mirror. Not so. Now I'd like somebody to please challenge me on that line of reasoning if it's not sound. And please leave the comments below. Okay? Each mirror is projecting reality at different angles, which is giving you a different perspective of the reality of your vehicle. And everything that's happening around your vehicle, so that you can see the cyclist coming up behind you on your left-hand side that you wouldn't be able to see. And if you're turning your car in that direction and you don't have that wing mirror, crash bang wallop, isn't it? No, not so. Or the possibility, the potential for crash bang wallop on your left-hand side. So it would be on the right-hand side. Just because the rear view mirror is giving you a clear sort of central view of what's going on behind you, the auxiliary mirrors, left and right, are also providing you with a rounded, objective view of the full 360-degree reality of your vehicle. Isn't it? Sorry if I'm being peculiar. Okay? But that to me is a sound line of reasoning. So it is with cultures, because each culture has its tangent conscious reality that you cannot transcend, because it's tangent, which is why we adhere to it. But the Eurocentric will not accept that the other cultures are based on something that is tangent. That it and only it is based on tangent reality. Tangent reality is the chemical structure of your brain that is able to perceive in a particular way. Okay, we can create scientific experiments to test certain things, to measure, but we've already experienced it in the world, things which cannot be tested or that make no sense in terms of science, that ought not to be. That if we just relied on a scientific trajectory, we would say it was impossible. I remember them saying about Usain Bolt, in terms of the technique that he used to run, that he had no business being the world champion. based on the technique that he used, or something to that effect. Fastest man on the planet. But there are other things, there are other examples of science where if we just use the scientific theoretical premise for it, we would say that, oh, that's impossible. But yet it just happens. It occurs. So we can't just say that because something hasn't been tested in a scientific way that adheres to the Eurocentric model of reality, that it is not tangent. And each consciousness, I would argue, is tangent, hence objective planetary reason. And each one gives you a unique angle on the world and the reality that we inhabit. Okay? And the Eurocentric claiming objective truth is what's gone wrong with the world. Okay? This capitalist, pessimistic situation. Okay? This racism that's come out of the capitalist economic world system. Yeah? Because we're saying that this is the one normal, inevitable path that humanity should tread. And this is going to open me up for I could go on about this for another hour. So I need to trim this down. Okay, because it's a huge, huge question. But my point is that objective planetary reason is there because each culture has its tangent attributes. And we need to give each culture its merit and refine it to remove the excesses and use each different culture to refine the other. But we haven't done that because the Eurocentric wants it wants its dominant place so that it can keep its supremacy in place so that the elite Eurocentric gatekeepers created through the Eurocentric system are allowed to reside at the top. And this is what I tapped into in my previous post, The Matrix is Real. This system benefits the elite, the ruling class elite. And if they were to accept other cultural modes of reasoning, it would challenge that hegemonic grip that the ruling classes have on society. And so we must realize that knowledge, even academic knowledge that claims its rigor and claims to be objective, is socially constructed to a certain extent. Knowledge is socially constructed and it serves its social masters. Okay, it is socially relevant. But that's my line of reasoning in terms of the multicultural project. And I think that, if you were to see it in that way, that each culture is tangent and thereby allows the other to be filtered out, the excesses of the other to be filtered out, that to me is highly positive. Okay? It would allow us to maybe stop world hunger by thinking that capitalism is everything, because the capitalism informs our moral compass as well. Into this very mean way of thinking, this dog-eat-dog survival of the fittest scenario. Okay? And I don't believe that to be sound. I don't believe that to be the height of the humanitarian project at all. I don't believe it to be inevitable at all, this situation. I don't believe capitalism is an inevitable construct. I think it was put there deliberately by a particular type of people thinking in a particular type of way. And then you've spread that as if it is some sort of objective truth. It is not. It certainly wasn't part of the Afrocentric reality. Okay? At all. And so we need to, that is how I want to see, to try and reason the multicultural project. And we could go in varying directions. But that is how I see multiculturalism in terms of the lines of reasoning that take place in the different cultures. They are simply part of one whole. Because as human beings, we're not even races as well, I'll say very briefly. We're not different races. We've all come from the human race. And because there's been genetic mutations and environmental climatic effects on the genetic mutation of genes, we have come up with the diverse spectrum of humanity that we experience today. But the origin is one human origin, okay? And we are all part of the same thing, simply going across, spanning a spectrum here. We're not own individual human beings, different human beings. We come from the same source. We come from the same source. And there are similarities that exist across human beings. And that's another way to see it, okay? That we are one human race. And that if we use the different cultures that exist to filter out the excesses of each culture, then we will get closer to the humanitarian project in its purest form. And that's my line of reasoning for now. So Jordan Peterson, I don't know, for me that's highly negative. That again is claiming that there needs to be one supreme way of seeing things and that everybody else is superfluous to a requirement. Almost like a Thanos type click of the fingers line of reasoning, isn't it? Almost, there's no way of us getting on. There's no point in the multicultural project. So essentially, I'm not saying that Jordan Peterson is saying that we should all be murdered, but it's almost like, there's one dominant culture that should reign and the rest is superfluous to requirement, apart from food. But other modes of reasoning are out of the window. And I don't see it that way at all. I think that reason is central to culture. And I think that we should, really try to see reason in that way. And that's why I use the analogy of the wing mirrors in your car, because every cultural perspective is based on the premise of tangent reality. It is tangent to that particular consciousness. And we need to take that on board. Okay? It's not just the Eurocentric that presents as tangent. So does the Afrocentric. It's tangent. It gives you an insight into tangent reality. So it is with the Asian-centric and all of the different cultures. And we need to be able to see them as having their place, give them the importance that they need, and allow them to have their day in order to filter out other cultures. Okay? Because if we didn't start off, if we didn't have the African mode of reasoning, then we wouldn't have modern civilization as it exists now. Now, that's another post. Okay? But without the Afrocentric consciousness, modern civilization would not exist. Certainly not in the way that we see it now, because it was the African-centered consciousness, its unique mode of intelligence, that gave us that was the genesis, that was the inception of modern civilization. Okay? And that has led humanity on to create and branch off into other modes of modern civilization as we have it now. That's not saying that the African-centered is superior. That just means to say that it had the qualities necessary to start the human race on its trajectory in terms of modern civilization. Okay, and then the Eurocentric has taken it to where it's taken it now, and each has its merit. Each has its flowers that need to be given to it. Okay, not one is better than the other. Each one filters out the excesses of the other, and that is my line of reasoning in terms of the rear view mirror and the auxiliary mirrors on the vehicle there that are giving us an objective planetary reason that allow us to see reality in an objective way that would help us, especially in our pursuit of saving the planet from climatic change. We would have been able to have averted that decades ago, maybe even millennia ago, if we had incorporated the African-centered worldview of harmony and equilibrium with planet Earth that is inherent to the African-centered culture. And we're not going to go there now because that's too deep. But I'm just saying, if we incorporated and saw the beauty and the reality in other modes of reason, we would not be on this negative trajectory, I believe, that we are in the capitalist world system with racism and the starvation and what's going on with Gaza and nuclear warheads and all of this situation that comes down to the survival of the fittest ideology. This whole process of the inevitability of the capitalist world system and the inherent nature of human beings being antagonistic and individualistic and materialistic at the end of the day. And that's what gives the need to weapons of mass destruction and guns and war. This idea of inevitability, that as human beings, the closest we get to civility is being inherently antagonistic, and therefore the capitalist trajectory is the only civilized, it is the end manifestation of the humanitarian project and as close that we're going to get to civility. And that is a very pessimistic, negative view. capitalism is not the height of the humanitarian project. This is not the limit to where we can go. Okay, humanitarian projects have been hijacked by the Eurocentric dimension in order to serve its masters. Okay, it is not the objective force at all. There are other cultural orientations. There are other ways that we could go. There are other insights, other modes of reasoning that would highlight and that would reveal the folly that's going on now in terms of the civilization that we're in, that is driving us off the cliff edge because it's not using its auxiliary mirrors in order to guide planet Earth on a safe trajectory and human race on a safe trajectory, which is why we're involved in violence and all of this nonsense around the globe. People are starving children in Gaza, rinsing all of the Earth's resources, all of the stuff that's going on under the helm of capitalism. We know that having 100 billion, 50 billion pounds in your bank account while other people starve is wrong. We know that that is wrong. That cannot be right. Okay? And we know that when we saw Nelson Mandela, okay, in the movie there, when he got his salary, looking at it and thinking it was too much money. He wanted to give back his salary because he felt inherently in the consciousness, in the Afrocentric consciousness, that money for one individual was excessive. He wasn't at peace with it. That mode of harmony with planet Earth and what is fair and what is reason and what is equilibrium in terms of the longevity of the planet and having the resources that one should have as an individual, he saw his salary as too much. That was the Afrocentric mode of harmony and equilibrium with planet Earth that is inherent to its consciousness. Okay? And the gems of that are absolute things that would have saved us from this current trajectory here, where planet Earth is on a trajectory to be extinct in more ways than one. Look around. Devastation is everywhere. Okay? We're not using the mirrors that are fitted on planet Earth to guide us. God has created a myriad of cultures. It's created the objective tools that we need to govern us and steer us safe. Okay, and we're not using them. The Eurocentric is bullying us into avoiding and ignoring the instincts of the other cultures that would steer us right. Okay? That's my line of reasoning. And I find it to be absolutely sound. Okay? And I would like somebody to challenge me in my line of reasoning. Okay? I'm not a professor, but okay, that's just my line of reasoning, okay, on the think well. And we'll leave it there for now. Thank you.